Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 38th episode of The Greats of History, the podcast where we get to know people with the epithet of the Great and try to get past the honorific and understand who they were, what they did, and why some people seem to like them so much. I'm grateful that you're here. I try to express my gratitude a lot. I say that I'm grateful at the start and end of every episode. These are more than words in a script. Every time I say that I'm grateful, it's a conscious expression of my appreciation. There are unlimited pulls on your time and attention. Every second you spend here is deeply meaningful to me. I appreciate it. And you. Thank you. Last time, we concluded our look at Herod the Great, the volatile king of Judea. Herod was a great builder with a refined aesthetic sense. He was also paranoid, violent, and decidedly prone to murdering his closest family. Personally, I think he's the most complicated character we've met so far in this entire series. But he stands out for another reason. Herod was intended to be the end point of Season 1 of The Greats of History. In Season 1? What does that mean? As this is the first you're really hearing of this, let me take a half step back and explain. And this will not take too long. All the way back in the introduction, I confessed to you that podcasting was new to me, that I was getting started without any experience in this medium, and I was unsure what would be involved, how much work it would take, etc. I also had no idea if anyone would find this show, would listen to it, rate it, share it, etc. Before I even wrote the first word of the introduction, I had my subjects picked out, starting with Sargon and ending eventually with Catherine the Great. All told, I picked about 24 people, equally split between BCE and CE. I started writing long before I started recording. In fact, I started the first draft of what became the Sargon the Great episode in early 2023. More than a full year before I released it. My goal was to write this series in its entirety so that I could keep up a once-a-week cadence and let it run from start to finish. But as I got deeper into this project, the episodes began getting longer. In large part, this is because our subjects, as they get a little closer to us in time, there are more sources to draw on. Early on, this challenge was finding enough things to say about folks like Sargon. The multi-part episodes of Alexander, Mithridates, Pompey, and Herod, etc., were each about the same length as any of my 3 books. Now, I said a moment ago that this was episode 38, but that numbering doesn't even account for things like the introduction, show announcements, and the 4 bonus episodes that I released. All told, this is something like 43 or 44 episodes that I have released, which kind of blows me away because at first I thought I could pull this whole thing off in 24 and I'm not even halfway through. So, around the time I was drafting the episodes on Ahsoka the Great, whom I just love, by the way, it hit me that I might not be able to keep up with a one-a-week cadence indefinitely. I caught up to what I had already written much faster than I could write new material. This is in part because the episodes have gotten longer, as I just mentioned. It's also because I've consciously chosen to write about people in places that, in many cases, I didn't know all that much about previously. This podcast series is giving me a chance to do something that I truly love, which is to learn and explore and share what I've found. As an example, I had always known that Herod's Temple project was on a grand, massive, significant scale and of deep cultural significance. But I also knew that my knowledge was generally pretty scant. I knew almost no specifics, details, facts, etc. To tell his story, I needed to tell the story of the Temple Mount. To research just that specific part of that specific episode, I read ancient sources, tracked down, downloaded, and read about a dozen peer-reviewed academic articles, watched recreations of the building within documentary TV programs, and read sections of books not about Herod but related to him. It took me about 6 weeks just to write the most recent episode. Mind you, this is not what I do for a living. In fact, this is a passion project. I haven't considered commercialization of it in any way. I have a day job, which I love too, and since that pays the bills, that has to come first. So this is to say, I now have recorded everything I've written. I have no inventory yet to be put out into the world. So I need a little time to start writing again, and I'm not sure how long it will take me to do it. I do have one bonus episode mostly complete, and I suspect that will come out soon enough. There are a few other The Greats from the BCE era that I skipped over, and a few of them strike me as good candidates for some single episode treatments. But beyond that, I'm not sure what to write. I have so many ideas of related topics. I'll bring you into my mind. Let me tell you a few things that I'm thinking about. 1. The rogues of history. I've always been fascinated by people who have lived outside lives of adventure and intrigue, people who defied convention and often frustrated the people around them. There are some larger than life figures from history, and I suspect some of these names are people we've heard of, but know we should probably know a little bit more about. Some of the people I have in mind are Alcibiades, Clodius, Sir Francis Drake, El Cid, Casanova, and Huey Long. How's that for an eccentric group? The through line in their stories is that they all poked a finger in the eye of social conventions and left an outsized mark on history relative to their contemporaries. Another idea rattling around in my brain is the, quote, others, close quote, of history. While the current series explores some of the greats, and there are plenty of interesting ones yet to get to, the great is just one epithet. There are some amazing names that people have earned or have been given that invite a closer look. Ivar the Boneless, Piero the Gouty, Ethelred the Unready, Ivan the Terrible, Pepin the Short, Ivilo the Cabbage, Alfonso the Slobberer, Childeric the Idiot, Louis the Good-for-Nothing, and Manuel the Sausage Maker. I mean, come on. Who does not want to learn about Ivilo the Cabbage? Okay, here's another. The Badass Women of History. One of the things that bugs me about this series is that it's a little bro-heavy. To the extent that women have appeared in this series, it's only really been in the context of their relationship to men. Now, this is to be expected as the series focuses on people with the epithet of the Great, and it took all the way until Catherine the Great until a woman was graced with that epithet. There's about 4,000 years between Sargon and Catherine, but it does bother me a little that I have only focused on the dudes. There are some truly exceptional women in history, and the format of the greats overlooks them almost by necessity. So I have considered a series or a group of episodes that cover some of the lives and careers of these women. An example, in London, there is a statue that honors a woman who burned the city to the ground and slaughtered every last person there. So why would the good citizens of London erect a spectacular statue to such an individual? Well, Boudica was a queen of the indigenous Iceni tribe. Among other things, she led a rebellion against the Romans, and this rebellion was violent, chaotic, and almost drove the Romans out of Britain entirely. And London, at the time, was a Roman colonial city. So Boudica is something of an indigenous national hero. Other women could include Joan of Arc, Harriet Tubman, Cleopatra, Zenobia. She was another of the great Eastern queens that almost toppled Rome. Artemisia, an Ionian queen and general/admiral who fought for King Xerxes I and commanded fleets and armies in the great conflicts between Greece and Persia. And on and on. These extraordinary women deserve their time on the stage too. Now those are biographical series. I have other ideas as well. These include Worst Year Ever, a look at the time period when those living through events, it would have felt to them that the world was ending. An example is the stretch from 1665 to 1666 in England. The country lost the flagship of its fleet in a horrific explosion that killed hundreds. It had been sailing upriver to prepare for deployment when, boom, the whole ship exploded. Then, England was hit with the Great Fire and the Great Plague in rapid succession, and finally it engaged and lost a naval war with the Dutch. To those living through events, it must have felt like the end of times. Staying with England, in 1066, Vikings and Normans invaded in sequence, toppling the last Anglo-Saxon king and initiating the dynastic system that is still more or less in place to this day. In 1453, the city of Constantinople fell to the Ottoman Turk ruler Mehmet II, and this epochal event finally killed the Roman Empire for good nearly 2,200 years after the semi-mythic founding of Rome. As you might imagine, there were more than a few people that were convinced that this signaled the coming of the end of the world. In 1177 BCE, mysterious seaborne warriors attacked Bronze Age civilizations, toppling some and nearly destroying others, such as Egypt. And no one knew who these people were, where they came from, or how they were upending the entire world all at once. If you were an Aztec in 1520 CE, the arrival of the Spaniards would definitely have brought about the worst year ever. Same with the Inca in 1533, when Francisco Pizarro and about 180 men toppled the Inca, an empire of approximately 12 million. So, you get the idea, and hopefully at least once you thought of the comic book guy saying, worst year ever. Another series is The Expeditions. It considers the age of exploration. It looks at specific expeditions organized by the likes of Columbus, Magellan, Cabot, Hudson, and even more recent ones, historically speaking, like Shackleton and Amundsen. Another is The Greats, but for civilizations. Some civilizations are well known, others are lost, but a look around at history could help us explore not just Rome, Greece, India, China, etc., but the Mongols, the Hittites, the Shavan, the Nazca, the Mali Empire, and so on. Still another, The Assassinations, exploring the assassinations of leaders that altered human history, their context, who the victims were, who the killers were, their motivations, what happened before and after, etc. Caesar, obviously, but Archduke Franz Ferdinand, of course. Lincoln, Henry IV of France, Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., Sadat, Giulio de' Medici, etc. Back on the biographical treatments, I have this idea that we should show a little love to some of the lesser known but still interesting and underrated Roman emperors, like Claudius, Pertinax, Gallienus, and Julian the Apostate. Hey, he could also be one of the others of history. Of course, there are also the remaining The Greats that I had picked out when I first dreamed up this series a couple years ago. The CE Greats that I had in mind are Constantine, the Roman emperor who legalized Christianity; Shapur II, the Sassanid Persian Empire who tilted the balance of power away from Rome and who was crowned Shah while still in the womb, meaning he never knew a single day he was not the king of kings, and he ruled for 70 years. Theodoric, the Gothic king that ruled the Western Roman Empire. Justinian, the Byzantine Empire who built the Hagia Sophia and almost reunified ancient Rome until plague almost toppled his empire. Gregory I, the scholar, theologian, and pope who did so much to organize the early and medieval church. Charlemagne, the first Holy Roman Emperor, who paradoxically was illiterate but still brought about the first Renaissance of the medieval world. Alfred, the Anglo-Saxon king who engineered one of the greatest upsets in military history by beating the Vikings. Roger I, a Norman adventurer who conquered and established a kingdom in Sicily. Genghis Khan, the great Mongol ruler who built the largest land empire in human history and who, if you will forgive the slight editorializing here, might be one of the most misunderstood people in history. Peter, the Russian Tsar, who simultaneously modernized Russia and conducted countless successful military campaigns. He, more than any other, made Russia a true world power. And of course, Catherine, the first woman in history to be called the Great. Also a great reformer, an aesthete, and expansionist. So, there you go. These are just some of the ideas I'm contemplating, and to be honest, I'm not sure what comes next. I love my The Greats, but I'm really fired up about some of these other ideas. And even when and if I pick a project, I'm not sure of the format. I could write and record episodes similar to the current structure and try to release when I have an even weekly cadence built up. Or I could do the Dan Carlin thing, which is to go deep on a topic, such as any of the ones above, and release an episode or two of various lengths at various times, and then give myself breaks between them to work on whatever comes next. So I ask you, what do you want? Keep going as is? Explore other topics? A little bit of all of the above? Write to me and tell me your thoughts. Philip@philipbarlag.com. 2 L's in Philip, of course, lest we confuse me with our old friend Alexander's father. I really would love to hear from you. I would also appreciate your help in spreading the word. Go tell someone about this. And if you're newer to this series, be sure to go back to the beginning and listen to the earlier episodes. There are more than 1,500 minutes of free content, so I hope you will listen and I hope you'll share. Every download of every episode, every time someone listens, it fills me with gratitude that is truly difficult to explain. I'm not sure what comes next, but I'm grateful you've been on this journey with me. I still can't quite shake the feeling that I have no idea what I'm doing, but at least I have company. And for that, for you, I am truly grateful.